Hi, Rowena. How are you?
Hi. So this is the picture that I was going to talk about, Mary's moment, that I'm still working on. And that's what I'm going to.
You know, I really love this piece. I love the tonality, the brush marks, everything about it.
Thank you.
To bring everything that you've been working towards for the last, few years, and it's got enough in it, but it gives enough space for people to get it into the picture and create their own narrative as well. So it'd be really good if you can explain to me what motivated you to approach this work and why you approached it in the way you did.
Okay. Well, it was inspired by a friend was reading an article which mentioned Mary's moments, which referenced the artist Mary Newcomb, whose images were quite sort of unusual juxtapositions or unusual viewpoints or angles, sort of about the way artists see things that other people don't notice. And so on our art Zoom, which we've been doing once a week all through lockdown, we decided to create our own Mary moments. And so I was reminded of a photo I took at Small Mind Studio about 3 years ago, where with all the sun and the glass and reflections, suddenly somebody's handbag and the furniture was superimposed on top of one of my paintings on the glass. So I took a photograph. So I used that as my starting point to create my Mary's moment.
I love that concept of the unexpected. That's, the unexpected narrative, but it's got so much in it.
The other evening, suddenly at dusk, I noticed my mother's table lamp was sort of shining on her garden fence. So again, another reflected image. And the other day I was talking to a friend on a walk through the trees and suddenly realised I could see more tree than her. It's that kind of strange moment.
Yeah, but they're strange but exquisite, aren't they? Because they're like little gifts to those who are more aware of their surroundings, more in tune with their surroundings. And then as artists, you have the opportunity to pick that up and do something with it and then show it to other people in a way that they can see it too. So you share it out back with the world.
So Fran White, another pure artist, she does the Zoom with me, and she had an amazing Mary's moment where her kitchen door was just slightly open and she got amazing reflections from that. Just very strange effects.
Yeah, she did. I saw that on Instagram where she got a lightning bolt down her stairs.
On the stairs, yes, it's amazing.
Like a moment. So this is about process and materials. Can you tell us, you found the moment and you've recorded it on your camera. So what's the process then? Where do you go then with it?
Well, I usually start with at least one drawing, sometimes a collage, but this time I did a continued line drawing of the main shapes. And then I made a couple of pastel studies that I was quite pleased with. In my sketchbook. All right, and then I felt that I had enough to have a go at the first painting of it, and I was also helped by what I've been doing on the pure back to basics, where you sort of work with a set process on one piece.
Yes.
So I had an idea of how to work on it in my mind. So I started with acrylic spray paints as the underpainting, which is a way, I don't always use them, but sometimes I do an underpainting start like that with some stencils and spray paint. Then I worked on top of that with acrylics and a squeegee, trying to keep everything loose. So it's like a pebble, the plastic rubber pebble.
Your process reminds me of Mary Beanie. Have you ever been in one of her masterclasses where she talks? I mean, she literally throws everything bar the kitchen sink at it. She brings out
Right.
coffee, camp coffee, and all sorts. And I love that. It's so inventive.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I use lace as a stencil in the underpainting, and a bit of that might show through later. But I love using my rubber pebble, which is like a big squeegee, for applying the paint. So then I did some oil on top, but still using the squeegee mainly, and keeping it loose. And I think that's what you like, the looseness of it.
I do. I love the shapes and the brush marks, but I love the fluidity. So it's so ethereal. It's got this sensation of three-dimensionality in the painting. You can see a pathway into it, and a lot of your work is about stairs and pathways, and you can see that in this one.
Yes, I always have to find a way into my compositions and some movement. But the other thing that intrigued me is it was a photograph from at least 3 years ago, and that idea has been sitting there, germinating, and as it were.
Is that often the case, that you take photographs or you catch things and then they just have to process for a while?
My work seems to be a combination of something that happens, something I see, and maybe some words as well, and they all go together. There's definite narrative behind them as a starting point, and they often take time to come together. So then I decided to have a go larger. Because the first painting was only on artboard, paper board. So I had to go on gesso board, larger. And I think you can see the painting behind me somewhere. I don't know if it can be seen, the pink one behind me.
Yes,
you could just see it.
Yeah, I can see it.
Anyway, but I started in a very similar way with spray painting, underpainting. And then acrylics on top with the squeegee and the oil. So it's done in a very similar way, but I suddenly realized that the composition this time was getting too busy. So I stopped and did a couple of my collages. So they help me to look at the composition and take stock, as it were. So I've done a couple of collages here. There was one big collage, but then this one. So I was looking at the original painting this time, and I was quite pleased with this collage.
That's amazing.
It has some pastels and things on top, because I quite like working over my drawings or my collages with pastel mixed media. And I love, in particular, the Sennelier oil pastels. If anyone's used those, they're gorgeous. They're really soft, but they disappear very quickly because they're so soft.
What's your preferred medium then? Because you've talked about pastels, you've talked about
I love oils and the texture, the creaminess, the colour that you can get. So oils is my preferred medium, but sometimes I like to work in the underpainting with acrylic because it dries quicker. I'm not a very patient person. So it suits to do the underpainting in acrylic and then get the effect that I want with the oils. But I sometimes use the oil pastels with the oils to do bridging or joining lines or areas of quick colour, and then blend them with the oil paints.
Wow. So, and you also go for a variety of formats. So you go for the square, and then we can see behind you on the left here quite a long portrait.
Yes.
Of a landscape, but it's in a portrait format. So yeah, you go for the small squares right up to quite different shapes. You're not you don't have a standard shape, it would appear.
No, I had an exhibition once called Square Lace, so I was very into squares, but I'm getting less. I quite like the long vertical portrait. So although I'm inspired by landscape, I always tend to paint portrait landscapes. And my husband gets cross because all my photographs are taken portrait, which is much harder on a computer screen. So I tend to work portrait more than landscape. But as you know, I also love collage. And I often start with collage, and it feels like I'm painting with the paper.
How do you approach the collage then? Do you have lots of materials in your studio that you resource?
I do, but it's less organised than a lot of people's collage. I like the spontaneity. So if I'm going out, I might just pick 6 sheets of, sometimes it's prints or watercolours I've done, old paintings that I tear up, or it might be a bit of magazine. But I tend to take things with me, and then I make myself use what I've got. So I don't sort of think, I need some pink for this bit, or I use creatively what I've got. So I try to restrict. I have got a huge chest of pieces, but I try to pull out a certain number rather than just let myself take anything.
And that restricted palette of materials, how does that affect you, the process that you go through?
I think it makes it more creative because I'm trying to create a shadow on the beach, and I have to use something, some fruit, a picture of some fruit, or, completely different colours.
The process of having to look at things from another person's perspective, how have you found that?
Well, that's interesting because obviously being forced out of your comfort zone is a really good thing. The initial reaction is always, why have I got to do that, or I don't want to do that. And at the moment we're working with a group of us are sending photographs to other people to work from. And my first reaction again was, I don't like this photo. But more comes out of it when you're pushed to work in a Baroque style or whatever it is that you didn't want to do. And that's how artists learn.
Yeah, absolutely. You learn and grow, don't you? I think for me, it kind of sits alongside that restricted palette of materials you take out with you to collage with. And if you get pushback, then you know you're growing, don't you?
The other thing is, exactly. exciting the new artists that you discover all the time. The African artist I discovered this week, I posted something yesterday for International Women's Day. She was born in Botswana, which is where I started my teaching, but I loved her style, and it was just sort of chance I discovered her by looking at another artist.
Yes, we can learn so much, can't we, by just having an open mind.
The large painting behind me, I'm now, I think it's more or less finished now, but it'll now sit on my easel, or an easel, for a long time with me looking and thinking. They take time before I'm sure.
Bring that one forward. So
I'll bring up and show you, yeah. So.
Wow, yeah.
Is that the right place?
Yes, and that's in oils?
That's in oils now, with the underpainting in acrylic, and it's on a gesso board.
Is that your
hardboard
final piece on a board, on a gesso board, as opposed to?
I tend to, in general, I prefer the board to canvas. When you go very large, canvas is better because otherwise it gets too heavy.
Yeah.
So I've got at the back there's a large canvas. So canvas often when it's bigger, but I love the smoothness of board, the gesso board.
And do you have your board prepared for you, or do you just buy it raw and prepare it yourself?
I usually prepare it myself, but this time was a bought one, so it was very smooth.
It looks stunning. Are you planning to frame that?
I tend to do a fairly simple tray frame. In fact, Mike helps, he puts them together now, and then I paint them in a sort of light grey, off-white colour.
You have your trademark tray frame colour.
Yeah. The one I'm using at the moment is called Elephant's Breath, which is a lovely name.
Yes, I love that. That's a Farrow and Ball, isn't it? I think.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. I love that colour. What top tips would you give to people about oil painting on board and the approach you take, which is having an idea, sitting with it for a while, and then going to experimental and sketch, and then up to that process that you go through? What is it that you think is so magical in that, and what top tips do you have?
As everyone knows, I mean, sketchbooks are invaluable. I've got pages and pages now of notes and thoughts and collages and all sorts of ideas.
Can you hold that up?
So can you see it? No. Yeah. So I just it's full of sketches, but writing ideas, thoughts that you have. That's an old photograph of my father's I found. Sketches that I've done in place. And there's so much here that I go back over. These would look at different artists when I wasn't very well. When I actually had COVID, I kept going by looking at other artists and making notes, and so just I've got sort of reams of ideas, and you go back to them and they sort of suddenly inspire you again. So, and because a lot of it is sort of, I have a lot too many ideas, so I have to write them down, and then coincidences come together. So a quote that I write down, and then somebody else mentions an article sort of related to it, and then I see something that makes me think of it, and they all come together and create a piece of work.
Yeah, that magic moment then takes you to your next sketchbook where you start collaging and doing your
Yes. So, and then as far as for me, as I say, the oil painting, I do quite like working in acrylics underneath for the simple reason that I can get the underpainting done quickly and then start the enjoyable bit, as it were.
That's your top tip. Have a long runway in, but then when you get going.
And the other thing is, my best paintings tend to just sort of burst out of me, But I think I'm realizing, it's useful to have some set processes as well, which might be used in a different way each time or a different order, but have some idea where you're going. But the other thing that I do, I'll get this one off the wall. So this one is the Future China. And can you see the red bits?
Yeah.
So the red bits are an old painting of some flowers that I didn't like, and it's been painted. So they're what you call little gifts from underneath that come through. But this painting, I have to say, is based on 2 years ago when I went to China briefly. But it did just happen one day, very quickly. So sometimes ideas that have been growing and brewing, but the actual end result sometimes suddenly bursts out.
I love that idea of you being in the studio and all of a sudden it's just like, that's it, give me a... So do you reuse canvases? If you're dissatisfied with a painting, do you then reuse a canvas?
I do, but only if sometimes, because I want a contrast in colour, and I think, but sometimes I just abandon them. But sometimes, yes, people would find interesting things underneath, as it were. What was the other thing? I had some other advice for people, but it's gone again.
I think you're a wealth of advice. I think you're when we do our clubhouses at Small Hive, you're always full of lots of magical nuggets of advice. It's very easy when you're in front of a room full of people. It's more tricky to come up with those nuggets when you're just sitting on your own in your studio. I love your studio. Is it very close to? Is it between Small Hive and your house?
It is, yes. So we had a garage built. A double garage, and then the studio's above it. And the garage seems to be Mike's workshop. There's never any cars in it. But the studios are up above, and I'm very lucky to have this space. I've got windows. I'd like to have bigger windows because I love the outside, but I'm very lucky to have this space. There's enough room to have different things going on everywhere.
Yes, yeah. And do you ever teach? Is that something that you ever do?
I have taught my whole life, but I have, in lockdown, I've decided it's time to move on. I love teaching, but I like having more time to come into the studio every day. Oh, that reminds me what I was going to say. The advice is, go into your studio, but don't have a plan. See where it takes you. I come in and I might paint a frame, or I might look through a sketchbook, do some tidying up, and then usually an idea comes. I think I want to work on that today, or sort of see where it takes you.
Do you have set studio times? So do you treat it like a job where you go into?
I treat it like a job, and the morning is sort of sacrosanct, but obviously it doesn't always work. But I tend to go for a walk, maybe do some sketching on the walk, take photos, and then come in the studio and then do chores later in the day.
So the morning time is your work time?
Yeah. I've always been a morning person anyway. So yeah, morning is my key, but there's nothing set in stone, but I try and come in every morning at least.
Yeah. Brilliant.